Kyle Whittington asks, does the Bible condone slavery?
Actually not. I wrote my dissertation on the Jubilee laws, which are the laws of freedom. And so what you find out is that under Moses, true slavery is outlawed for Israelites.
Let's pause it for just a second, just so that everybody kind of understands what he's talking about there. So his dissertation was, I can't remember the full title, but it's about the Jubilee. The Jubilee is something that gets really talked about a lot in Leviticus 25. And sort of the basic structure of it, just so everybody's on the same page here. Every seventh year, the Israelites were supposed to let the land lie fallow, right? So they're supposed to work it for 6 years, do their crops, all that stuff. And then the seventh year, just let it lie fallow, give it a year of rest. And then 6 more years and let the seventh year lie fallow. They were supposed to do that for 7 full cycles. So 7 full cycles would be 49 years total. And then in the 50th year, they were supposed to declare what's called the Year of Jubilee. And in the Jubilee, for Israelites, loans, debts, all these things were to be forgiven. It didn't matter if you took out that loan in the 48th year or in the first year. All debts were to be forgiven, loans to be forgiven. And anybody that had been taken into, of course, in this chapter, it wouldn't be slavery. It would be like being kept as a hired worker. But at any rate, everybody is supposed to have all their debts wiped clean. Any land that they've sold to somebody else, another Israelite, it's supposed to go back to them. Everybody goes back. It's a big reset button, right? And this is something that's typical in the ancient Near East. You see Underaru is the Akkadian term that's used to describe this type of freedom that's being declared. It wasn't cyclical, like as described in Leviticus 25, but it's something that usually when a king came to power or at a certain point in his reign, he would declare all debts for citizenry to be forgiven. But that's what the Jubilee is. And so he's talking about the Jubilee because the Jubilee is prominent in Leviticus 25, which is where we see this sort of notorious set of verses about slavery. But that's why he's mentioning the Jubilee here.
Okay. Yeah. And from what I understand about the Jubilee, it's only about like the Israelite people, like it's only about Israelite, like indentured servants. And so that's why it caught me off guard when Bergsma initially comes off with, is slavery condoned in the Bible? It's like, actually not. It's like, I don't know what Bible he's reading.
The Scholar Apologetics one.
Yeah. All right. Let's see how he argues about this.
That's the point of Leviticus 25. You can indenture a fellow Israelite if he owes you money. That means you can make him work for you, okay? But you can't treat him like a slave. His civil rights are always intact. What that would look like, I don't know exactly in the ancient world, but he has civil rights as a free man. But yes, he can work for you to pay off his debt to a point.
Well, I didn't notice this before when I've been reviewing this video, but like he says that he doesn't know what it would look like for like slaves to have civil rights in the ancient world. But I feel like, the civil rights of slaves have been pretty well defined in other cultures, like in the Code of Hammurabi and other law codes in the ancient Near East. Am I incorrect about that?
No, I mean, I think, the idea of civil rights would probably be a little anachronistic. But I think as we understand it, there are certain things that citizens were entitled to, and the law would, again, sort of lay those things out. I think it's a complicated matter. That's probably what he's doing if we're being charitable here. I think he's probably saying, like, if I had to sit down and list what, things people had that we would consider to be civil rights, I don't know that off the top of my head I'd be able to list those out. I think if you were to say, hopefully if you were to say to him, well, did they have this or did they have that, that he'd be able to answer like yes or no, or, something like that.
Yeah, I can see how the concept of civil rights, like as we understand them now, would be anachronistic. I guess in my brain, I was interpreting him talking about civil rights, which would be just like what kind of rights were afforded to slaves at this time. I guess that's how I interpret it, but I could obviously be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I guess it's tough to know. The thing that really, somebody said no audio. Sorry, I just noticed that in the side chat. But that's Facebook. Maybe that's.
We've got. We've got audio. I've double checked it, so I believe that it's. I believe that it's fine. I think it's on their end.
See, this is why I shouldn't look at the chat, John. This is why. Just like a squirrel, The thing that kind of, I don't know, there's a little bit of, we've got to be careful here, because one of the things that we need to make sure that we keep in mind here, and I kind of, know this from what I remember the rest of the video, but I'm going to point this out here because it's incredibly important in this context. There is not homogeneity between the three law collections that describe laws about slavery, right? You have the Covenant Code in Exodus 21, you have the Deuteronomic Code in Deuteronomy 15, and then you have here the Holiness Code in Leviticus 25. These are not texts that are able to be harmonized with one another, right? They're very likely written at different times by different people with different ideas. And so the one thing that I want everybody listening to bear in mind is that Exodus 21 and Deuteronomy 15 both say that you can keep fellow Israelites as debt slaves, right? This is universally understood to be the case among subject matter experts writing in the secondary literature, outside of just looking at the text itself. In Leviticus 25, he's made mention that you can't enslave a fellow Israelite. That is novel in Leviticus 25. It is distinct from Exodus 21 and Deuteronomy 15. This is something that the writers of the Holiness Code are likely, reacting against, working with, and turning on its head earlier passages that describe the law. So we have to keep those things distinct. They're not just one set of consistent laws.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. And yeah, I didn't have any problem with what Bergsma said about indentured servitude. So, which I know who the fuck am I? I'm just an amateur. Let's continue to see what he has to say about the law code.
Only to the Jubilee year, and then every 50th year, all this is canceled and everybody's freed and goes home. So the worst thing that can happen to an Israelite is that you have to work for somebody to pay off your debt to them. It's kind of like indentured servitude.
For those that are interested, Bruce Wells has an article out in, I can't remember the edited volume. I'm so sorry. It's 2011 book, I believe, if people are interested. It's about foreigners. The Foreigner in the Law, I think is what it's called. Achenbach, I think, is one of the editors, or is the editor. Anyway, but he has an article called The Quasi-Alien in Leviticus 25. And essentially what Bruce Wells' argument is, and he's a legal expert from the ancient Near East down at the University of Texas, Austin, is that even though the text looks good, like what he's saying here, the worst that could happen to an Israelite, they have to work, that actually what the text is doing, what the law is doing in Leviticus 25 is arguably a sneaky way of making it worse for the Israelite. And it has to do with antichretic pledge or anticresis, but we don't have to get into that. But if people are interested in that, it's not even here so clear cut. But at best, I would say at best, the worst thing that can happen to an Israelite is that he has to work until the Jubilee.